Martha Ann Johnson. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, this Georgia woman found herself at the center of a series of heartbreaking child deaths that initially baffled authorities and raised no red flags. Born in 1955, Martha Ann grew up in a world far removed from the spotlight, but her life would soon become a tapestry of marriages, motherhood, and mounting suspicions. Her story begins in the Atlanta area, where she navigated a turbulent personal life marked by multiple husbands and the joys and strains of raising children. Her first marriage brought forth a son named James William Taylor, a bright-eyed toddler who entered the world full of promise. But on September 25, 1977, tragedy struck when Martha Ann reported that her 23-month-old James was unresponsive after a nap. Emergency responders rushed to the scene in Fulton County, but it was too late. The young boy was pronounced dead, and medical examiners at the time attributed the cause to sudden infant death syndrome, a catch-all diagnosis for unexplained child fatalities that was common in that era. No foul play was suspected, and the family mourned quietly, with Martha Ann appearing devastated, as any mother would. Life moved on, or so it seemed. Martha Ann remarried, this time to a man named Earl Bowen, and the couple welcomed more children into their home. But the shadows of loss loomed large. In 1980, another child, Earl Wayne Bowen, a healthy 31-month-old boy, met a similar fate. Again, Martha Ann called for help, claiming she found him lifeless in his bed. Autopsies pointed to a possible seizure disorder, and once more the death was ruled natural. The community offered sympathy. Neighbors brought casseroles, and the Bowens tried to rebuild. Yet just a year later, in 1981, the pattern repeated with chilling precision. 3-month-old Tabitha Janelle Bowen, the couple's infant daughter, was found dead in her crib. Asphyxiation was noted, but without evidence of external trauma, officials chalked it up to the same mysterious ailments that had claimed her siblings. Martha Ann's grief was palpable. She wept at funerals, clung to her surviving children, and leaned on her husband for support. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming in her marriage to Earl Bowen. Arguments escalated, separations loomed, and in the midst of this turmoil, the deaths occurred with eerie timing, often right after heated disputes. By 1982, Martha Ann had separated from Earl Bowen and was involved with another man. But her 11-year-old daughter from a previous relationship, Jenny Ann Wright, remained her constant. Jenny was a lively girl, full of energy and curiosity, attending school in Clayton County and dreaming of the future. On February 3, 1982, Martha Ann made yet another frantic call to authorities. She reported finding Jenny unresponsive in her bed, her body cold and still. Paramedics arrived at their modest home in the Atlanta suburbs, but revival efforts failed. An autopsy by the state crime lab revealed asphyxiation as the cause, with no signs of illness or accident. This time, however, whispers began. 4 children dead in 5 years, all under similar circumstances? It seemed too coincidental, but without concrete evidence. The case went cold. Investigators filed reports, but the file gathered dust on shelves in the Clayton County Police Department. Martha Ann moved forward, remarrying and blending into everyday life, working odd jobs and raising her remaining family members. The deaths faded from public memory, dismissed as a tragic string of bad luck. That is until 1988, when a persistent reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution decided to revisit old cases. Digging through records, the journalist uncovered patterns that had been overlooked. The timing of the deaths aligning with marital strife, the consistent method of asphyxiation, and Martha Ann's hefty build, over 250 pounds, which could have played a role in accidental or intentional smothering. The story ran, stirring public interest and prompting law enforcement to reopen the investigation. Detectives from Clayton County dusted off the files, re-interviewed witnesses, and pieced together a timeline. They learned that after each argument with her husband, Martha Ann would express frustration, sometimes hinting at ways to get back at him. Neighbors recalled her as a devoted mother on the surface, but one who struggled with anger and impulsivity. Family members shared stories of her turbulent relationships, where children became unwitting pawns in adult conflicts. On July 3, 1989, investigators brought Martha Ann in for questioning at the Clayton County Police Department. What started as a routine interview turned into a marathon session captured on audio and videotape. Under the steady gaze of detectives, Martha Ann broke down. She admitted to smothering Jenny Ann by rolling onto her while she slept, using her weight to cut off the child's air supply. She confessed to doing the same to James William Taylor back in 1977, but she denied involvement in the deaths of Earl Wayne and Tabitha, insisting those were genuine accidents. Her motive? In her words, it was to reunite with her estranged husband after fights. The deaths, she claimed, brought them closer in grief, if only temporarily. The confession sent shockwaves through the department. Here was a mother admitting to acts that defied comprehension, all in the name of salvaging a rocky marriage. With the tape in hand, prosecutors moved swiftly. Martha Ann was arrested and charged with murder in the death of Jenny Ann Wright. As the trial approached in April 1990, she retracted her confession, claiming it was coerced under duress from relentless questioning. Her defense team argued that the deaths were all natural, pointing to the initial medical findings and suggesting that sudden infant death syndrome and seizures explained everything. They painted Martha Ann as a victim of circumstance, a woman plagued by misfortune rather than malice. But the prosecution had the video, which they played for the jury, a raw, unfiltered glimpse into her admissions. Witnesses testified to the marital discord, and experts reevaluated the autopsies, concluding that smothering fit the evidence far better than natural causes. On May 5, 1990, the jury deliberated and returned a guilty verdict for first-degree murder in Jenny's case. Martha Ann was sentenced to life in prison, to be served at the Georgia Department of Corrections. Though suspected in the other 3 deaths, she was never charged for them due to lack of additional evidence beyond her partial confession. Behind bars, Martha Ann maintained her innocence regarding the other children, participating in prison programs and keeping a low profile. In the years that followed, her case drew attention from true crime enthusiasts and legal scholars, who debated the fine line between tragedy and intent. Family members of the victims expressed mixed emotions, relief at justice for Jenny, but lingering questions about the others. In 2020, the Georgia Parole Board tentatively granted her parole after 30 years served, citing her age and behavior in prison. But public outcry from relatives led to reviews and delays. As of now, she remains incarcerated, a reminder of how long-buried secrets can resurface. Lamora Williams. In the fall of 2017, this 24-year-old Atlanta resident became the subject of a case that horrified the nation. Living in a modest apartment in the Oakland City West End complex, Lamora was a mother of 4 young children, juggling the demands of parenthood with personal struggles. Her sons, 1-year-old Jakarta Penn and 2-year-old Kayante Penn, were energetic toddlers, full of life and laughter, while her older children added to the bustling household. Lamora worked shifts to make ends meet, relying on family and friends for support. But beneath the routine lay tensions. A recent breakup with her boyfriend, mounting stress, and reports of mental health challenges. It was sometime between midnight on October 12th and 11 p.m. on October 13th, 2017, that the unthinkable unfolded. Lamora placed a distressing call to 911, her voice trembling as she reported finding her 2 youngest sons dead in their home. Dispatchers tried to calm her, guiding her through the chaos, but the scene that awaited first responders was devastating. Officers from the Atlanta Police Department arrived at the apartment to discover Jakarta and Kayante, with severe burn marks on their bodies, lying motionless near the kitchen. The older siblings were unharmed but traumatized, and the apartment showed no signs of forced entry or external foul play. Paramedics confirmed the boys' deaths, and the case was immediately handed to homicide detectives. The investigators secured the scene, photographing every detail and collecting evidence. The oven in the kitchen became a focal point, its door ajar, interior scorched, suggesting it had been used in a manner far beyond cooking. Autopsies performed by the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office revealed that the boys had suffered thermal injuries consistent with being placed inside a hot oven. The cause of death was ruled as homicide by thermal burns and asphyxiation from the heat. As details emerged, the community reeled. Neighbors described Lamora as a quiet but overwhelmed mother, often seen with her children at local parks or stores. Family members came forward expressing shock and disbelief, while the boy's father, who was not living with them at the time, grieved publicly, demanding answers. Lamora was taken into custody shortly after, Sucks charged with 2 counts of murder. In her initial statements to police, she claimed to have come home from work and found the boys unresponsive, with no explanation for their injuries. But as interrogations progressed, inconsistencies piled up. Detectives learned of her recent relationship troubles, arguments with her boyfriend that escalated into a breakup, leaving her distraught. Phone records showed frantic calls and messages around the time of the incident, and witnesses reported hearing cries from the apartment that night. Prosecutors built a case around premeditation, arguing that Lamora had intentionally placed the toddlers in the oven and turned it on, leading to their agonizing deaths. The motive appeared tied to emotional turmoil, perhaps a desperate act amid overwhelming pressures. By 2018, a grand jury indicted Lamora on multiple charges: 4 counts of murder, including felony murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault, 2 counts of concealing a death, and 1 count of making a false statement. The case drew widespread media attention, with outlets like local news stations and national papers covering every development. Defense attorneys sought to highlight Lamora's mental health history, filing motions for evaluations, and arguing that she suffered from postpartum depression and other conditions that impaired her judgment. Experts testified during pretrial hearings about the psychological toll of single motherhood and untreated mental illness, but the prosecution countered with evidence of intent, including the lack of immediate aid to the children and her composed demeanor in parts of the 911 call. The trial, delayed by the global pandemic and legal maneuvers, finally commenced in 2024. In a Fulton County courtroom, prosecutors presented a timeline of events, playing the 911 audio for the jury, a haunting recording where Lamora's voice shifts from panic to resignation. Forensic experts detailed the burn patterns, confirming the oven's role, while pathologists explained how the heat caused rapid organ failure. Witnesses, including family and neighbors, took the stand, painting a picture of a young woman under strain, but capable of rational actions. The defense called mental health professionals who diagnosed Lamora with severe depression and possible psychosis, suggesting the act was not deliberate but a tragic breakdown. Lamora herself did not testify, but her team urged the jury to consider mercy in light of her circumstances. After days of testimony and deliberation, on November 15, 2024, the jury found Lamora guilty on all 14 charges. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read, with family members of the victims weeping in relief. Sentencing followed swiftly: life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 35 years. The judge in his remarks emphasized the brutality of the crimes and the need for justice for the innocent boys. Lamora showed little emotion, her head bowed as she was led away in handcuffs. Appeals are expected, with her legal team arguing procedural errors and the influence of her mental state. But for now, she resides in a Georgia state prison, honoring her case a stark entry in the annals of familial tragedy. As we wrap up this first part of our exploration into these Georgia cases, remember that these stories are based on real events, drawn from court records, news reports, and official investigations. If you're hooked on the details and want more, like this video, comment below with which case hit you hardest, and subscribe to Easy Case channel for the next installments. Evelyn Odom. Back in the late 1980s, in the quiet town of Albany, Dougherty County, Georgia, Evelyn Odom lived a life that seemed unremarkable on the surface. A single mother navigating the challenges of raising her young daughter amid the everyday hustle of a working-class existence. Born in the mid-1960s, Evelyn had grown up in the South, and where family ties ran deep and community whispers could linger. By 1988, she was in her early 20s, sharing a home with her live-in boyfriend, Ulister Sanders, a man in his mid-20s who worked local jobs to support their blended household. Their home was modest, tucked away in a neighborhood where neighbors knew each other by sight, but not always by story. Evelyn's daughter, Kenyatta Odom, affectionately called Keiki, was a spirited 5-year-old girl born on August 28, 1983. Keiki had a bright smile and a curiosity about the world, attending a local preschool and playing in the yards of Albany's residential streets. But beneath the normalcy, tension simmered. Reports from later investigations would reveal a household marked by stress, with Evelyn and Ulysses often arguing over finances, work responsibilities, and the demands of parenthood. It was sometime in the summer or fall of 1988 that the events leading to Kiki's disappearance unfolded in their Albany residence. According to court documents and investigative findings, an incident occurred where Kiki suffered severe injuries from exposure to hot water, resulting in extensive burns that went untreated. The exact circumstances of that moment remain pieced together from forensic evidence and witness statements gathered years later, but the outcome was tragic. Kiki succumbed to her injuries without medical intervention. In the aftermath, Evelyn and Ulysses made a decision that would haunt the case for decades. Rather than seeking help or reporting the death, they chose to conceal it. They wrapped Kiki's body in a blanket, placed it inside a duffel bag, and then encased the bag in a container filled with concrete. This makeshift tomb was hidden inside an old television console, a bulky piece of furniture common in homes of that era. On December 21, 1988, road workers in Millwood, Ware County, about 200 miles southeast of Albany, stumbled upon the discarded console in a wooded area used as an illegal dumping site. Curious about the unusual find, they pried it open and discovered the horrifying contents: a small child's remains preserved in the concrete encasement. The Ware County Sheriff's Office was immediately notified, and deputies secured the scene along the rural roadside. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation's Regional Investigative Field Office in Douglas was called in to assist, when marking the beginning of what would become a 35-year quest for answers. Agents carefully extracted the body, noting the careful wrapping and the concrete that had hardened around it, suggesting deliberate efforts to hide the evidence. The child, estimated to be between 3 and 7 years old, showed signs of decomposition, but no immediate indicators of foul play beyond the concealment. An autopsy by the state medical examiner confirmed the victim was a young African-American girl with injuries consistent with severe burns that had not been treated, leading to infection and death. Without identification, she was dubbed Baby Jane Doe, or Christmas Doe, a poignant nod to the holiday season of her discovery. Sketches and reconstructions of her face were released to the public, depicting a cherubic child with wide eyes and braided hair, in hopes of sparking recognition. Media outlets across Georgia picked up the story, running headlines about the mysterious child found in the woods, but tips led nowhere. The case file grew thick with dead ends. Dental records checked against missing children reports, clothing fragments analyzed for clues, but the identity remained elusive. As years turned into decades, the Ware County Jane Doe case became a staple in cold case units. Investigators from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation revisited it periodically, employing new technologies as they emerged. In the early 2000s, DNA profiling advanced, and samples from the remains were entered into national databases like CODIS, but no matches surfaced. Public appeals continued, and with billboards and online forums discussing the case, true crime podcasts dedicating episodes to her story, and amateur sleuths theorizing about her origins. Meanwhile, Evelyn Odom had moved on with her life. She changed her name to Zemeka Luciana at some point, perhaps seeking a fresh start, and continued living in Albany. Ulysses Sanders remained in the area as well, their paths intersecting occasionally, but without drawing suspicion. Evelyn found work in various fields, raised other children, and blended into the community, her past a closely guarded secret. Ulysses pursued his own endeavors, never hinting at the events of 1988. The breakthrough came in 2023, fueled by advancements in genetic genealogy. When the Georgia Bureau of Investigation partnered with forensic experts to upload DNA from the remains to public genealogy databases, where distant relatives or profiles provided leads. Investigators traced family trees, narrowing down possibilities until they focused on the Odom family in Albany. Interviews with relatives revealed that Evelyn had a daughter named Kenyatta, who vanished around 1988, with vague explanations given at the time. Stories of her being sent to live with other family members or lost in the system. A DNA match confirmed it. The remains were those of Kenyatta Odom. On November 9, 2023, agents arrested Evelyn Odom, now 56, and Ulysses Sanders, 61, at their respective homes in Albany without incident. The arrests were executed quietly, with search warrants yielding additional evidence from old residences and storage units. A grand jury in DeKalb County indicted them on multiple charges: felony murder, first-degree cruelty to children, aggravated battery under family violence statutes, concealing the death of another, and conspiracy to do so. The case moved to trial in 2025, with pretrial hearings revealing more about the nightmarish sequence. Prosecutors from the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office presented forensic reports showing that Kiki's burns were consistent with immersion in scalding water, likely from a bathtub, and that the lack of medical care constituted aggravated cruelty. Witnesses, including extended family, testified to Evelyn's frustration with Kiki's needs, hinting at underlying resentments. See, those specifics were debated in court. Defense attorneys for Evelyn argued that the evidence was circumstantial after so many years, questioning the reliability of aged DNA and suggesting accidental injury rather than intent. Ulister, in a separate plea deal, admitted to concealing the death and providing false statements to investigators, agreeing to testify against Evelyn in exchange for a lighter sentence. His account detailed how they panicked after the incident, deciding to hide the body to avoid scrutiny. The trial began in August 2025 in a DeKalb County courtroom packed with media and curious onlookers. Over several days, jurors heard from pathologists who re-examined the remains, explaining how the concrete preserved key evidence like burn patterns on the skin. Relatives spoke of Kike as a joyful child who loved drawing and playing outside, humanizing the long cold case. Evelyn took the stand briefly, denying direct involvement and claiming Ulister handled the concealment, but her testimony faltered under cross-examination. On August 27, 2025, after hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Evelyn of felony murder, first-degree cruelty to children, conspiracy to conceal the death, and concealing the death. She showed no visible reaction as the verdict was read, her face stoic amid the courtroom murmurs. Sentencing loomed, with prosecutors seeking life imprisonment, while Ulister awaited his own hearing for the lesser charges. In the wake of the conviction, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation held press conferences, praising the persistence of cold case teams and the power of modern forensics. Keek's story, once a footnote in Unsolved Mysteries, now stood as a testament to unresolved justice. Evelyn remains in custody at a state facility, her appeals process beginning, as the community in Albany reflects on the hidden horrors that can lurk in familiar places. The case closed a chapter for investigators, but for those who remembered Kike, it reopened wounds long scarred over. Isabel Martinez, a 33-year-old woman originally from Mexico who had entered the United States without documentation, lived in a modest single-family home on Emory Drive with her husband, Martin Romero, and their 5 young children. Martin, also 33, worked as a mechanic to provide for the family, while Isabel managed the household, caring for the kids who ranged in age from 2 to 10. The family was known in the neighborhood as close-knit, often seen at local parks or community events, with the children, Isabella, Dakota, Dylan, Axel, and Diana, playing in the yard under the Georgia sun. But behind closed doors, Isabel struggled with personal demons. Relatives later shared that she had been deeply affected by her father's recent death in Mexico, leading to bouts of depression and erratic behavior. She turned to spiritual practices, lighting candles and praying fervently, sometimes speaking of unseen forces influencing her life. That fateful night, as the family slept, Isabel allegedly armed herself with a kitchen knife and moved through the darkened home. She began in the bedrooms, attacking her children one by one. 9-year-old Diana Romero awoke to the chaos, witnessing her mother stabbing her siblings before turning on her. Diana fought back, sustaining serious wounds, but survived long enough to recount the horror. Isabel then confronted Martin, who attempted to intervene and seek help, but she stabbed him repeatedly as he tried to escape. After the assault, Isabel called 911 herself, her voice calm amid the bloodshed, reporting the incident without hysteria. Gwinnett County police officers arrived around 4:47 a.m., entering the home to find a scene of unimaginable violence. Blood-stained walls, floors, and bedding. Martin Romero lay lifeless in the hallway, while the children were discovered in their rooms. Isabella Martinez, 10 years old, Dakota Romero, 7, Dylan Romero, 4, and Axel Romero, 2, were all pronounced dead at the scene from multiple stab wounds. Diana, gravely injured with cuts to her torso and limbs, was rushed to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, where she underwent emergency surgery and began a long road to recovery. Isabel was found at the scene with self-inflicted wounds, though not life-threatening, and was taken into custody without resistance. Paramedics treated her on site before transporting her to a hospital for evaluation. Detectives from the Gwinnett County Homicide Unit secured the property, collecting evidence including the bloodied knife, clothing, and fingerprints that matched the sequence of events. An initial interview at the hospital revealed Isabel's detached demeanor. She spoke of promising her family to an evil force and expressed no remorse, instead framing the acts as a release from earthly struggles. Nary Immigration and Customs Enforcement placed a hold on her due to her undocumented status, complicating the legal proceedings. By the afternoon of July 6, she was booked into the Gwinnett County Jail on 5 counts of murder, 5 counts of malice murder, and 6 counts of aggravated assault. The following day, July 7th, Isabel appeared in Gwinnett County Magistrate Court for her first hearing before Judge Michael Thorpe. The courtroom was tense, filled with media and shocked community members. As cameras rolled, Isabel displayed bizarre behavior. She smiled broadly, gave thumbs-up gestures to the press, and appeared to pray silently, shaking her head when the judge addressed her. This odd conduct fueled speculation about her mental state, with relatives later telling reporters that she had been fighting demons in the weeks prior, lighting candles for her deceased father, and speaking cryptically about spiritual battles. The judge denied bond, citing the severity of the charges and flight risk, and ordered a psychological evaluation. Outside the courthouse, Martin's family gathered, mourning the loss and demanding justice for the innocent lives taken. Investigators delved deeper, interviewing neighbors who recalled hearing no unusual noises that night, but noted Isabel's increasing isolation. A search of the home uncovered journals and notes hinting at her turmoil, with entries about guilt, loss, and otherworldly influences. Diana, from her hospital bed, provided a chilling account to child welfare caseworkers on July 10th. She described waking to her mother's attacks, how Isabel told her she was going to see Jesus as she stabbed, and how she watched her father fall while trying to call for help. The Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services report detailed Diana's trauma, noting her bravery in recounting the events despite her pain. Prosecutors from the Gwinnett County District Attorney's Office built a case around premeditation, pointing to the methodical nature of the stabbings and Isabel's post-incident call as evidence of awareness. The trial faced delays due to competency evaluations. Mental health experts diagnosed Isabel with severe depression and possible psychotic episodes, but ultimately deemed her fit to stand trial. Defense attorneys argued diminished capacity, citing her grief and cultural beliefs in spiritual forces as mitigating factors. The proceedings began in April 2019 in a Gwinnett County Superior Court. Over the course of the trial, jurors viewed crime scene photos, heard forensic testimony on the wounds, each victim stabbed multiple times in vital areas, and listened to audio of the 911 call, where Isabel's voice remained eerily composed. Diana, now recovered physically but scarred emotionally, did not testify in person, but her recorded statements were played, bringing tears to the courtroom. Relatives testified about Isabel's downward spiral after her father's death, but prosecutors countered that her actions showed intent, not insanity. On April 24, 2019, after brief deliberations, the jury convicted Isabel on 5 counts of murder, 1 count of aggravated assault, and 1 count of third-degree cruelty to children. The verdict came without a recommendation for the death penalty, yet leading to an automatic life sentence without parole. In his closing remarks, the judge described the crimes as heinous and unforgivable, emphasizing the betrayal of trust in a family setting. Isabel showed little emotion, her earlier erratic behavior subdued by the weight of the outcome. She was transferred to a state women's prison, where she remains, her appeals exhausted in subsequent years. Diana was placed with relatives, rebuilding her life away from the shadows of that night. The Loganville community held vigils for the victims, planting trees in a local park in their memory, as the case faded from headlines but lingered in local lore. As we conclude this second installment on Easy Case Channel, these accounts remind us of the real investigations and resolutions that shape our understanding of the past. If these stories have captivated you, give this video a like, share your reactions in the comments, and subscribe for more factual deep dives. Leilani Simon. In the early days of October 2022, this 24-year-old resident of Savannah, Chatham County, found herself thrust into the public eye under the most harrowing circumstances. Living in a rented home on Buckhalter Road with her fiancé, Daniel Youngkin, her mother, Billie Jo Howell, and her 3 young children, Leilani, navigated a life complicated by relationships, substance use, and the daily grind of motherhood. Her youngest, Quinton Simon, was a cherubic 20-month-old boy with curly hair and a playful demeanor, born in January 2021. Quinton shared the home with his siblings, so often seen toddling around the yard or playing with toys in the living room. But on the morning of October 5th, 2022, Leilani made a call to 911 that would set off a chain of events rippling through the community. She reported Quinton missing from his playpen, claiming he had vanished sometime between midnight and 6 a.m. while the household slept. Her voice on the recording carried urgency, describing how she had searched the house and yard to no avail, insisting the front door was unlocked and perhaps an intruder had taken him. Chatham County Police Department officers arrived swiftly at the modest single-story home, cordoning off the area and launching an immediate search. Neighbors gathered outside, one offering descriptions of the toddler, last seen in a blue shirt and black pants, and volunteers combed nearby woods and streets. The Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the effort, bringing in K-9 units and divers to scour retention ponds and the nearby Ogeechee River. Media descended on the scene, with local stations like WTOC and national outlets broadcasting Leilani's tearful pleas for Quinton's return. She appeared on camera, hugging her other children close, begging anyone with information to come forward. Daniel, her fiancé, stood by her side, echoing the calls for help, while Billie Jo, Leilani's mother, who had legal custody of the children due to prior concerns, expressed bewilderment at the disappearance. Early tips flooded in, but none panned out. Investigators noted the family's dynamics. Leilani's history of drug use, including opioids and cocaine, and ongoing custody disputes with Quinton's father, who lived out of state. As days stretched into weeks, the tone shifted. On October 11th, Chatham County Police Chief Jeff Hadley held a press conference announcing that foul play was suspected and that Quinton was presumed dead. The search pivoted to recovery, focusing on a local landfill where household trash from the area was dumped. Teams in hazmat suits sifted through tons of debris at the Superior landfill in Savannah, a grueling process that involved heavy machinery and manual labor under the Georgia sun. Meanwhile, detectives interviewed Leilani multiple times at the police headquarters. Her accounts varied slightly, first claiming she last saw Quinton at 5:30 a.m., then adjusting timelines. Phone records showed late-night activity, and surveillance footage from nearby cameras captured a vehicle resembling hers, leaving the home around 1:30 a.m. and returning later. Witnesses reported arguments in the household, with Leilani expressing frustration over Quinton's needs amid her personal struggles. Billie Jo told investigators about Leilani's erratic behavior, including a recent eviction notice and financial strains. The turning point came on November 18, 2022, after weeks of landfill searches yielded fragments of human remains. Dental records and DNA testing confirmed they belonged to Quinton Simon. The Chatham County Coroner's Office ruled the death a homicide, though the exact cause was undetermined due to the decomposition and fragmentation. Bones scattered amid the refuse suggested blunt force trauma or asphyxiation, but specifics eluded experts. That same day, authorities arrested Leilani at her home, charging her with malice murder, felony murder, concealing the death of another, and making false statements to police. She was booked into the Chatham County Detention Center, her bond denied due to the severity of the charges. In a jailhouse interview with local media, Leilani maintained her innocence, tearfully insisting she would never harm her child and suggesting Quinton's father or an unknown abductor was responsible. The arrest warrant detailed how investigators believed Leilani had struck Quinton fatally during the night, then disposed of his body in a dumpster near the home to cover her tracks. By early 2023, a grand jury indicted Leilani on 19 counts, expanding to include assault and battery charges based on evidence of prior injuries to Quinton. Pre-trial hearings in Chatham County Superior Court revealed more. Text messages from Leilani complaining about motherhood, a history of child welfare interventions by the Georgia Division of Family and Children Services, and witness accounts of her substance use. Defense attorneys filed motions to suppress certain statements, arguing Leilani was under the influence during interviews, but Judge Tammy Stokes denied them, citing her coherent responses on record. The case drew comparisons to other high-profile child disappearances, but prosecutors emphasized the unique evidentiary challenges. No intact body for a full autopsy, no murder weapon, relying instead on circumstantial threads like timelines, forensics, and behavior. The trial commenced in October 2024 in a packed Savannah courtroom. Prosecutors from the Chatham County District Attorney's Office painted Leilani as an overwhelmed mother who snapped under pressure. They presented cell phone data placing her near the dumpster at odd hours, landfill workers' testimonies about the trash collection route, and expert analysis of the remains showing perimortem fractures consistent with abuse. Quinton's siblings, now in foster care, did not testify, but their prior statements described hearing cries that night. Leilani took the stand in her own defense, admitting to heavy cocaine use but claiming amnesia about the events. She described waking to find Quinton unresponsive, panicking, and disposing of him out of fear, but denied intentional harm. Her lawyers argued reasonable doubt, pointing to the lack of direct evidence and suggesting accidental death from co-sleeping or a fall. Cross-examination highlighted inconsistencies in her stories, with prosecutors playing recorded calls where she discussed the case nonchalantly with friends. After 2 weeks of testimony, on October 25, 2024, the jury deliberated for hours before returning guilty verdicts on all 19 counts. Leilani bowed her head as the foreperson read the words, her family in the gallery gasping in unison. Sentencing followed on November 21, 2024. Victim impact statements from Quinton's paternal relatives described the void left by his absence, while Leilani's supporters pleaded for leniency, citing her troubled upbringing and addiction issues. Judge Stokes sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years, plus 10 years for the additional charges, to be served consecutively. In her remarks, the judge noted the betrayal of maternal trust, transferring Leilani to the Georgia Department of Corrections Lee State Prison for Women. But the story didn't end there. In September 2025, Leilani filed a motion for a new trial through her appellate attorney, arguing insufficient evidence to prove homicide, let alone her direct involvement. The filing claimed the state failed to establish the manner of death beyond speculation, and that her constitutional rights were violated during non-custodial interrogations, where police elicited incriminating details without proper warnings. On January 9, 2026, Leilani appeared virtually in Chatham County Court for a hearing on the motion. Her lawyer emphasized the extremely weak case, lacking physical proof of murder, while prosecutors countered that the issues had been previously addressed and rejected. The state was given 45 days to file a formal response, with a follow-up hearing set for March 2nd. As of now, Leilani remains incarcerated, her appeal process unfolding amid public scrutiny and family divisions. Quinton's memory lives on through vigils in Savannah parks, where candles flicker in remembrance of the toddler lost too soon. Dakota Taylor. In the small town of Rennes, Georgia, population just over 2,000, this young woman grew up in a community where everyone knows their neighbors, but secrets can simmer beneath the surface. Born around 2004, Dakota entered adulthood early, becoming a mother at 17. Her first son, Micah Taylor, arrived in 2021, a 7-month-old bundle of joy who brought light to her modest home life. Dakota lived with family and her partner, working local jobs to support her growing responsibilities. But on a day in late 2021, exact details pieced from later investigations, emergency services responded to a call from her residence. Micah was found unresponsive, and despite resuscitation efforts at Jefferson Hospital, he was pronounced dead. The initial autopsy by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's medical examiner listed the cause as undetermined, with no overt signs of trauma. Authorities noted the home environment, but without evidence of foul play, the case was closed as a tragic accident, a possibly sudden infant death syndrome, or an unforeseen medical issue. Life continued for Dakota. She mourned publicly on social media, posting tributes to Micah with heart emojis and promises to remember him forever. By 2024, she had another child, an infant son whose name remains protected in records but described as 8 months old at the time of the incident. Dakota, now 21, balanced motherhood with everyday challenges in Rennes, a town known for its pine forests and quiet streets. On December 30th, 2024, history echoed when another emergency call came from her home. The 8-month-old was discovered lifeless in his crib, paramedics rushing him to the same hospital where efforts again failed. This time, red flags waved higher. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, recalling the prior death, requested the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's involvement immediately. Agents from the Thompson Regional Office secured the scene, interviewing Dakota and family members who described her as a devoted parent, but one facing stresses like financial woes and relationship strains. Autopsies on the second child revealed inconsistencies, subtle signs of asphyxiation or neglect that didn't align with natural causes. Investigators revisited Micah's case, exhuming his remains for re-examination with advanced forensics. Pathologists found patterns. Both infants showed evidence of possible smothering, with petechiae in the eyes and lungs indicating oxygen deprivation. Phone records and witness statements painted a picture of Dakota's frustrations, to texts complaining about sleepless nights and the burdens of single parenting. Neighbors recalled hearing cries abruptly silenced, and child welfare records showed prior visits from the Georgia Division of Family and Children Services after anonymous tips about the home. On November 21, 2025, after nearly a year of probing the second death and linking it to the first, agents arrested Dakota at her Rennes home without incident. She was charged with 2 counts each of malice murder, felony murder, and first-degree cruelty to children, serious felonies carrying life sentences. Booked into the Jefferson County Jail, Dakota appeared before a magistrate for her initial hearing, where bond was denied given the dual homicides and risk to the community, where prosecutors from the Augusta Judicial Circuit outlined the case, alleging Dakota intentionally caused the deaths through suffocation, motivated by overwhelming parental duties. Defense counsel countered with claims of accidental tragedies, pointing to the initial undetermined rulings and suggesting medical anomalies like undiagnosed conditions. The investigation uncovered a timeline. Micah's death 4 years prior, now reclassified as homicide based on the pattern. Family members expressed shock in media interviews, with some supporting Dakota's innocence, while others distanced themselves. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation held a press release, emphasizing the thoroughness of the probe and the role of forensic reevaluation. As the case progressed into 2026, pre-trial motions filed in Jefferson County Superior Court sought to separate the charges for each child, arguing prejudice from combining them. Discovery revealed expert testimonies on infant forensics, with pathologists detailing how initial autopsies missed subtle indicators due to decomposition or limited testing at the time. Dakota remained silent publicly, her social media account scrubbed of posts as the small town buzzed with speculation. A bond hearing was scheduled, but sources indicated low chances of release given the charges. The prosecution built on circumstantial evidence, no alibis for the times of death, inconsistent statements during interviews, and a pattern that defied coincidence. Community vigils for the boys drew crowds to Rennes City Park, where teddy bears and balloons marked the loss. In the courtroom, as proceedings unfolded, witnesses from the medical community testified to the boys' health prior to the incidents. No chronic illnesses noted in pediatric records. Dakota's partner provided statements about her demeanor, noting periods of isolation. The case highlighted systemic gaps. After Micah's death, no follow-up restrictions were placed on Dakota, allowing her to have another child without oversight. As of January 2026, Dakota awaits trial, housed in a secure facility, her fate hanging on the jury's interpretation of the evidence. The boys' paternal relatives advocate for justice, establishing funds in their names for child abuse awareness. Ren's, forever changed, grapples with the reality that danger can hide in the familiar. Kara Cotton. In the close-knit community of Vienna, DeKalb County, Georgia, a town of about 2,000 souls nestled amid cotton fields and quiet highways, this 27-year-old woman lived a life marked by the routines of single motherhood and the shadows of personal challenges. Born in the mid-1990s, Kara grew up in the South, where family networks often intertwined with community support systems. By 2022, she resided in a modest home on South 3rd Street, raising her 4-year-old son, Jason Mathis, a lively boy with an infectious smile who loved playing outside and watching cartoons. Jason, born in 2017, shared his days with Kara, who worked sporadic jobs and navigated the complexities of parenting amid financial strains and relational ups and downs. Neighbors described her as reserved and often seen walking with Jason to local stores or parks, but whispers circulated about her household. Anonymous tips to child welfare agencies hinting at concerns over living conditions and supervision. It was on January 20th, 2022, that the facade began to crack. Family members, including Jason's grandmother, contacted the Vienna Police Department, reporting that they hadn't laid eyes on the toddler in several months. They expressed worry, noting Kiara's evasive responses when asked about his whereabouts. Stories of him staying with relatives or being out of town that didn't add up. Officers from the small department, led by Chief Shane Rowland, initiated a welfare check at Kiara's home that day. Upon arrival, they found her cooperative on the surface. But her explanations shifted, first claiming Jason was with his father, then admitting he might be elsewhere. The inconsistencies prompted the involvement of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's Regional Investigative Office in Perry, about 30 miles away. Agents arrived, securing the scene and conducting initial interviews. Kara, under questioning, provided vague details, but no immediate evidence of foul play emerged. A missing child alert was issued, describing Jason as an African-American boy with brown eyes and hair, last seen wearing typical toddler clothes. Flyers circulated through DeKalb County and neighboring areas, with media outlets like local television stations broadcasting his photo and pleas for information. As the search intensified over the next few days, volunteers combed wooded areas near Vienna, while K-9 units sniffed along roadways and ditches. The Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services revealed prior interactions with Kara, reports dating back to 2020, including investigations into allegations of neglect and inadequate supervision. Caseworkers had visited the home multiple times, documenting cluttered living spaces and concerns over Jason's well-being, but no removals had occurred due to insufficient evidence of imminent danger. Family members shared with investigators that Kara had isolated herself, limiting visits and communication, which raised red flags in hindsight. On January 24, 2022, agents brought Kara in for a formal interview at the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office. What started as routine questioning evolved into a pivotal moment. Under the steady pressure of detectives, Kara broke, providing information that directed authorities to a specific location, an overgrown area behind a vacant shopping center in DeKalb County, about 15 miles south of Vienna. That evening, a joint team from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Vienna Police, and Crisp County Sheriff's Office converged on the site. A desolate spot littered with debris and tall grass, hidden from passing traffic on Highway 280. Using Kara's directions, they unearthed human remains wrapped in a plastic shower curtain, partially buried in shallow earth. The discovery was somber. Forensics teams carefully excavated the site under floodlights, photographing every detail and collecting soil samples for analysis. The remains, in an advanced state of decomposition, were transported to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's crime lab in Decatur for autopsy. Preliminary examinations suggested the body was that of a young child, matching Jason's description, with no immediate signs of trauma visible externally due to the condition. Dental records and DNA testing would later confirm the identity on February 1, 2022, sealing the tragic connection. With the remains located, authorities arrested Kara Cotton at her home on January 25, 2022. She was charged with malice murder, felony murder, concealing the death of another, and second-degree cruelty to children, felonies that carried potential life sentences. Booked into the DeKalb County Jail without bond, Kiera appeared before a magistrate the following day, her demeanor quiet as the charges were read. When her statements to police captured on video, she admitted to causing Jason's death sometime in the fall of 2021, though specifics varied. Investigators pieced together a timeline. Around October or November 2021, an incident occurred in the home where Jason suffered fatal injuries, possibly from blunt force or neglect, leading to asphyxiation. Rather than seeking medical help, Kiera wrapped the body and transported it to the Quarterly site in her vehicle, disposing of it to avoid detection. Motive appeared tied to overwhelming stress. Texts and social media posts reviewed by detectives showed her expressing frustration with motherhood and daily pressures. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation held a press conference on January 27, 2022, at the Vienna City Hall. Special Agent in Charge Joe Montgomery detailed the sequence, praising the collaborative effort and emphasizing the role of family tips in cracking the case. He noted that the autopsy, completed by state pathologist Dr. Jacqueline Martin, ruled the death a homicide with evidence of perimortem injuries consistent with abuse, though decomposition obscured some details. The shower curtain and burial method pointed to deliberate concealment. Community reaction was swift. Vigils sprang up in Vienna's Central Park, where candles illuminated photos of Jason, and residents donated to a fund for his burial. Jason's paternal family spoke out, demanding accountability and questioning the oversight by Child Services. In August 2022, our investigative reports released under open records requests by outlets like WALB News revealed more. Prior DFCS cases included complaints of physical discipline and unsanitary conditions, with Kiera receiving parenting classes but no further action. The case moved to the DeKalb County Superior Court, where District Attorney Louis Lamb oversaw the prosecution. Pre-trial hearings in the spring of 2023 addressed evidence admissibility, with defense attorneys arguing Kiera's statements were coerced amid emotional duress. Motions to suppress were denied by Judge Sarah Murphy, who cited the voluntary nature of her cooperation. Discovery uncovered witness testimonies from neighbors who heard arguments and cries from the home, and forensic analysis of Kiera's car showing trace evidence linking to the burial site. As Kiera remained incarcerated, participating in jail programs, while her legal team prepared a defense centered on mental health. Evaluations diagnosed her with depression and anxiety, suggesting diminished capacity. Trial began in October 2023 in a courtroom filled with media from Macon and Atlanta. Prosecutors presented a narrative of chronic neglect escalating to violence, playing Kiera's interview tapes where she described the incident as an accident gone wrong. Experts testified on the decomposition timeline, estimating death around late October 2021, aligning with when family last saw Jason. The defense called psychologists who spoke of Kiera's troubled background, including her own history in foster care, arguing the act stemmed from untreated trauma rather than malice. Kiera testified briefly, tears streaming as she expressed regret, claiming she panicked after finding Jason unresponsive from a fall. Cross-examination highlighted her delays in reporting and the concealment, undermining her account. On November 15, 2023, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury convicted Kiera on all counts: malice murder, concealing death, and cruelty to children. The courtroom erupted in sobs from Jason's relatives as the verdict was announced. Sentencing occurred on December 5, 2023. Victim impact statements painted Jason as a joyful child who loved trucks and animals, while Kiera's family pleaded for mercy. Judge Murphy imposed life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years, plus 10 years for the additional charges. Kiera showed little reaction, her gaze fixed downward as she was led away in shackles. Appeals followed in 2024, with her team citing evidentiary issues and ineffective counsel, but the Georgia Court of Appeals upheld the conviction in September 2025. As of early 2026, Kiera resides at the Pulaski State Prison for Women, enrolled in rehabilitation programs. The case prompted reviews of DFCS protocols in DeKalb County, with new training on monitoring high-risk families. Jasion's memory endures through a scholarship fund in Vienna, aiding local children as the town reflects on the signs that might have been heeded. Marcia Edwards. In August 2019, this 58-year-old accomplished businesswoman and philanthropist resided in a spacious townhome in the East Vinings Park community off Steinhaus Lane, a gated enclave known for its privacy and proximity to the city's bustle. Born in the early 1960s, Marcia had built a formidable career in healthcare, founding MME Enterprises, a medical equipment supply company that catered to hospitals and clinics across the Southeast. Divorced from her husband, renowned surgeon Chris Edwards Sr., she co-parented their two adult children while maintaining an active social life, attending galas and serving on boards for organizations like the Atlanta Women's Foundation. Her son, Christopher Edwards Jr., 24, was a recent graduate pursuing interests in media and entertainment, working as a social media manager and aspiring to produce content. Charismatic and outgoing, he enjoyed Atlanta's vibrant scene, often posting about travels and family gatherings on Instagram. Her daughter, Erin Edwards, 20, was a rising junior at Boston University, studying communications with a passion for journalism. Erin, described by friends as bright and ambitious, spent summers in Atlanta, interning at local media outlets and volunteering. The family appeared picture-perfect, vacations documented online, holiday photos showing smiles. But beneath it, Marcia grappled with personal setbacks. Recent business stresses, health concerns, and the emotional toll of her divorce lingered, though she projected strength to those around her. On the evening of August 21, 2019, when the quiet of the Vinings neighborhood was pierced by gunshots around 8 p.m., neighbors in adjacent townhomes heard the reports but dismissed them as fireworks or a car backfiring. It wasn't until the next morning, August 22nd, that concern arose when Marcia failed to appear for a scheduled meeting. A colleague, unable to reach her, contacted Chris Edwards Sr., who lived nearby. He arrived at the townhome with a key, entering to a horrific scene. Marcia, Christopher, and Erin, all deceased in the living room, surrounded by blood and shell casings. He immediately called 911, his voice breaking on the recording as he described the bodies. DeKalb County police officers responded within minutes, securing the three-story home and notifying the medical examiner. Investigators from the DeKalb County Major Crimes Unit, one led by Sergeant Dana Pierce, processed the scene meticulously. The bodies were positioned in a semicircle, Marcia on the couch, Christopher and Erin on the floor nearby. A 9mm handgun, registered to Marcia, lay beside her, with spent cartridges scattered. No signs of forced entry or struggle suggested an internal incident. Autopsies performed by the DeKalb County Medical Examiner's Office on August 23rd revealed the grim details. Christopher had been shot 5 times, 3 in the torso, 2 in the head, at close range. Erin suffered 3 gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen. Marcia had a single self-inflicted wound to the chest, piercing her heart. Toxicology reports showed no drugs or alcohol in their systems, and time of death aligned with the evening gunshots. The manner was ruled homicide for the children and suicide for Marcia, confirming the murder-suicide classification. Word spread rapidly through Atlanta's elite circles. Chris Edwards Sr. released a statement via his attorney, expressing devastation and requesting privacy. Friends and colleagues of Marcia were baffled. She had attended a charity event days prior, appearing composed. Social media posts from her account in the weeks leading up showed inspirational quotes and family photos, with no overt signs of distress. Investigators reviewed her communications, emails hinting at financial pressures from her business, and texts to friends about feeling overwhelmed. A note found in the home, addressed to loved ones, expressed regret and love, though its contents were not publicly released. And the motive seemed rooted in despair, perhaps exacerbated by undiagnosed depression or a culmination of life's burdens. By August 23, 2019, media outlets like the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Fox 5 Atlanta covered the story extensively, highlighting the family's prominence. Erin's Boston University community held a memorial service, with classmates sharing stories of her kindness. Christopher's friends organized a fundraiser for mental health awareness in his name. On August 28th, the family established memorial funds, the Aaron Edwards Scholarship for Aspiring Journalists at Boston University, and the Christopher Edwards Jr. Fund for Young Entrepreneurs. A joint funeral was held on August 30th at a Vinings church, attended by hundreds, including Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, Inc., who spoke of the city's collective grief. In the months following, the DeKalb County Police Department closed the investigation, releasing autopsy reports in November 2019 that detailed the multiple shots, underscoring the deliberate nature. Public speculation swirled on social media in true crime forums, with theories ranging from hidden deaths to familial conflicts, but official records pointed to Marsha's internal struggles. Chris Edwards Sr. filed probate documents, revealing Marsha's estate valued at over $1 million, distributed to charities and surviving relatives. The townhome sold in 2020, its new owners unaware of the history until media inquiries. As years passed, the case became a touchstone for discussions on mental health in high-achieving families. By 2026, the scholarships continued to award funds annually, keeping Aaron and Christopher's legacies alive. Marsha's company was absorbed by a larger firm, her contributions remembered in industry circles. Vinings moved on, but the echoes of that August night linger in quiet conversations. As we close this fourth chapter on Easy Case Channel, these factual accounts draw from the trails left in public records and reports. If they've drawn you in, hit like, comment on the twists that surprised you, and subscribe for the finale. Tell me when you're ready for part 5 to wrap it all up. Teresa Black. In the closing months of 1998, this 20-year-old single mother from Charlotte, North Carolina, made a decision that would echo through the years. Born Teresa Ann Bailey in the mid-1970s, whom she had grown up navigating the challenges of young adulthood, including early motherhood. Her son, William Deshaun Hamilton, born on September 26, 1992, was a lively 6-year-old boy with a gap-toothed smile and boundless energy. William attended elementary school in Charlotte, where teachers noted his curiosity and occasional absences, but nothing alarming enough to trigger deeper scrutiny. Teresa worked odd jobs to support them, relying on family and friends for childcare. But strains mounted, financial pressures, relationship woes, and the demands of raising a child alone. In December 1998, Teresa withdrew William from his school without explanation, packing their belongings and heading south to Atlanta, Georgia, where she had connections through extended family. They arrived in the bustling metro area, staying transiently in motels and with acquaintances in DeKalb County, a diverse suburb east of the city, known for its mix of urban and wooded landscapes. What transpired next remains pieced together from forensic evidence, witness recollections, and Teresa's own varying accounts. Sometime between December 1998 and early 1999, William fell ill in their temporary lodgings near Clifton Springs Road. According to statements Teresa later provided, the boy accidentally ingested windshield wiper fluid from a container left accessible in the room, mistaking it for a drink. He became violently sick, vomiting and weakening rapidly. Rather than seeking medical help at a nearby hospital like Grady Memorial or DeKalb Medical Center, Teresa claimed she tried home remedies. Fearing judgment or involvement from authorities due to her unstable situation, William's condition deteriorated over days, culminating in his death around late December or early January. Overwhelmed and panicked, Teresa wrapped his body in a blanket and carried it to a wooded area adjacent to a church cemetery at the intersection of Clifton Springs Road and Clifton Church Road, a secluded spot hidden by dense trees and undergrowth, far from prying eyes. She buried him in a shallow grave, covering the site with leaves and debris, then left Atlanta, returning to North Carolina before eventually relocating to Phoenix, Arizona, where she rebuilt her life under her married name, Teresa Ann Bailey Black, on February 26, 1999. A cemetery worker tending graves at the nearby church stumbled upon the partially exposed remains while clearing brush. The DeKalb County Police Department responded immediately, cordoning off the area and calling in the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's forensic team. The skeleton, that of a young African-American male estimated between 5 and 7 years old, showed no obvious signs of trauma like fractures or gunshot wounds. Clothing fragments clung to the bones, a small jacket and pants suitable for a child his age. The medical examiner's autopsy, conducted at the state crime lab in Decatur, determined the time of death as several months prior, but the cause remained undetermined due to decomposition. Without identification, the boy was labeled John Clifton Doe, a nod to the discovery location. Sketches of his possible appearance circulated through media outlets like the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and local television stations, depicting a cherubic face with wide eyes and curly hair. Tips poured in, but none matched. Dental impressions were compared to missing children reports nationwide, and the case entered the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's database, where it lingered as a haunting, unsolved mystery. Years turned into decades as the file gathered dust in the DeKalb County cold case unit. Investigators revisited it sporadically, applying emerging technologies. In the early 2000s, DNA samples from the remains were profiled and uploaded to CODIS, the national DNA database, yielding no hits. Public appeals continued, and with age-progressed images released in 2010, showing what the boy might look like as a teenager, but silence persisted. Meanwhile, Teresa Black had married, raised other children, and worked in customer service roles in Phoenix, never mentioning William to new acquaintances. Family in North Carolina assumed he was with her or lost in the shuffle of moves, accepting vague explanations without pressing further. The breakthrough arrived in February 2022, powered by genetic genealogy. The DeKalb County District Attorney's Office Cold Case Unit, partnering with forensic genealogists from companies like Parabon Nanolabs, uploaded the boy's DNA to public databases like GEDmatch. Matches to distant relatives traced family trees back to the Bailey lineage in North Carolina. Interviews with extended family revealed Teresa's son William had disappeared around 1998, with stories of him being placed in foster care or sent to live elsewhere, falling apart under scrutiny. A DNA sample from Teresa, obtained voluntarily during a visit to Phoenix, confirmed the maternal link. On June 28, 2022, Phoenix Police Department officers arrested Teresa at her home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, executing a warrant from Georgia. She was extradited to DeKalb County Jail, where she faced charges: 2 counts of felony murder, 2 counts of cruelty to children in the first degree, aggravated assault, and concealing the death of another. In her initial statements to detectives, recorded at the DeKalb County Police Headquarters, Teresa admitted to burying William, but insisted his death was accidental from the poison fluid, denying any abuse or intent. Prosecutors from District Attorney Sherry Boston's office built a case around neglect, arguing that failing to seek medical aid constituted cruelty and led to his preventable death. Pretrial hearings in DeKalb County Superior Court spanned 2023, with motions to suppress Teresa's statements denied by Judge Stacey Heydrich, who ruled them voluntary. Discovery revealed school records from Charlotte showing William's withdrawal, motel receipts in Atlanta, and witness accounts of Teresa appearing alone after the move. The defense, led by public defenders, emphasized the accidental ingestion and Teresa's fear as a young, impoverished mother avoiding child services intervention. Why jury selection began in January 2024, drawing media from across the state, with outlets like 11 Alive and Fox 5 Atlanta covering the proceedings live. Over 5 days in a packed courtroom, prosecutors presented a timeline. William's healthy school photos contrasted with the skeletal remains. Forensic toxicologists testifying that wiper fluid could cause fatal methanol poisoning if untreated, but survival was possible with prompt care. Pathologists detailed how starvation or dehydration might have contributed, though decomposition limited conclusions. Witnesses included family members who recounted Teresa's secretive departure from North Carolina, and experts on child welfare who highlighted missed opportunities in the system. Teresa took the stand, her voice steady as she described the panic of watching William die, while burying him in desperation to avoid blame. Her attorneys argued reasonable doubt on intent, suggesting the charges overreached. Prosecutors countered with her decades of silence, pointing to a life rebuilt without reporting the death. On January 10, 2024, after hours of deliberation, the jury returned verdicts. Not guilty on the 2 felony murder counts, not guilty on the 2 cruelty to children counts, not guilty on aggravated assault, but guilty on concealing the death of another. The courtroom stirred with mixed reactions: relief from Teresa's supporters, disappointment from those seeking fuller accountability. Sentencing followed on January 12, 2024. Victim impact statements from William's paternal relatives described the lingering pain of uncertainty, while Teresa expressed remorse for her choices. Judge Heydrich imposed the maximum, 10 years in prison, to be served at the Georgia Department of Corrections Metro State Prison for Women. Appeals filed in 2024 challenged the conviction, arguing insufficient evidence for concealment given the burial's intent to honor rather than hide, but the Georgia Court of Appeals upheld it in October 2025. As of early 2026, Teresa serves her sentence, participating in educational programs behind bars. The case prompted reviews of cold case funding in DeKalb County, with new grants for genetic testing. William's grave, once unmarked, now bears his name at a Decatur cemetery, where annual memorials draw advocates for unidentified victims. DeKalb County reflects on the boy in the woods, his identity restored but justice partial. Tiffany Moss. In the fall of 2013, this 30-year-old woman resided in a modest apartment complex in Lawrenceville, about 30 miles northeast of Atlanta, a growing suburb with parks and schools dotting its landscape. Born Tiffany Nicole Moss on July 20, 1983, she had navigated a life of relationships and responsibilities, marrying Emin Moss in the early 2000s. Emin, a truck driver often away for work, brought his daughter from a previous relationship into the home. Imani Gabrielle Moss, born on April 23, 2003, was a vibrant 10-year-old girl with dreams of becoming a dancer. Imani attended elementary school in Gwinnett County, where teachers noted her quiet nature and occasional bruises. But reports to the Georgia Division of Family and Children Services led to investigations that closed without removal, citing insufficient evidence. The household included Tiffany and Emin's two younger children, born in 2009 and 2011, creating a blended family dynamic fraught with tensions. Tiffany managed the home while Emin worked long hauls, but resentment simmered. Imani later described in case files feelings of being singled out, with punishments escalating from timeouts to physical discipline. By mid-2013, the abuse intensified. Tiffany began restricting Imani's food as a form of control, locking her in a room for days with minimal sustenance like bread and water. Emin, aware but passive, failed to intervene, later admitting in statements he feared disrupting the family. Imani's weight plummeted from a healthy average for her age to skeletal proportions. School absences piled up, excused by notes claiming illness. Neighbors in the apartment complex heard cries but attributed them to typical child tantrums, not alerting authorities. On October 28, 2013, Imani succumbed to starvation in the family's apartment on Old Norcross Tucker Road. At death, she weighed just 32 pounds, her body emaciated with protruding bones and organ failure from prolonged malnutrition. Rather than calling for help, Tiffany and Emin wrapped her remains in a blanket and placed them in a galvanized steel trash can in the bathroom. Over the next days, they attempted to dispose of the body by dousing it with lighter fluid and setting it ablaze in a wooded area behind the complex. But the fire smoldered without fully consuming it. On November 2, 2013, Emin, overcome with guilt, called 911 from a nearby grocery store parking lot, confessing the events. Gwinnett County police officers arrived at the apartment, discovering the charred can with Imani's body inside. The scene was secured, with forensics teams photographing the grim evidence: burn marks on the container, remnants of clothing, and the child's frail form. Tiffany was arrested that day at the home, charged with murder, cruelty to children, and concealing a death. Emin, cooperating with investigators, faced similar charges, but later pleaded guilty to felony murder and related counts in 2015, receiving life without parole plus 20 years to be served at Georgia State Prison. In her initial interview at police headquarters, Tiffany denied direct involvement, claiming Imani had refused food voluntarily, but evidence contradicted her. Text messages between her and a man discussing the problem and photos on their phones showing Imani's declining state. The Gwinnett County Medical Examiner's autopsy confirmed starvation as the cause, with no underlying medical conditions and noted prior injuries like burns and scars from abuse. Prosecutors from District Attorney Danny Porter's office highlighted the prolonged nature, estimating it took weeks for Imani to die, her body shutting down organ by organ. The case drew outrage, prompting reforms in Georgia's child welfare system, new protocols for following up on abuse reports, and training for caseworkers. Tiffany's trial, delayed by legal maneuvers and the pandemic, it commenced in April 2019 in Gwinnett County Superior Court before Judge George Hutchinson. In a stunning move, Tiffany elected to represent herself, waiving appointed counsel despite warnings. Over the guilt phase, prosecutors presented harrowing evidence. Crime scene photos eliciting juror tears, Imani's school records showing weight loss, and Iman's testimony detailing the starvation plan as Tiffany's idea to teach her a lesson. Tiffany cross-examined minimally, asking vague questions, and presented no witnesses or opening statement, sitting silently through much of the proceedings. On April 29, 2019, the jury convicted her on all counts: malice murder, felony murder, first-degree cruelty to children, and concealing a death. The penalty phase followed immediately. Prosecutors sought death. When arguing the torture's heinousness, Imani endured isolation, scalding baths, and beatings alongside starvation. They called experts on child abuse and relatives who spoke of Imani's gentle spirit. Tiffany again offered no mitigation, declining to testify or call family, even as standby counsel urged otherwise. On April 30, 2019, after brief deliberations, the jury recommended death by lethal injection, the judge imposing the sentence amid courtroom sobs. Tiffany showed no emotion, her gaze fixed ahead as she was remanded to custody. Appeals began automatically, with the Georgia Supreme Court reviewing in 2020, upholding the conviction but remanding for sentencing issues. A resentencing hearing in 2022 reaffirmed death. As of early 2026, Tiffany remains the sole woman on Georgia's death row at Lee Arundel State Prison, her case under federal habeas review, challenging self-representation and ineffective assistance claims. Executions in Georgia have been paused amid legal challenges to lethal injection protocols, delaying any date. Imani's legacy spurred the Imani-Moss Act in 2015, mandating annual DFCS audits. Memorials in Lawrenceville parks honor her, with dance scholarships in her name. The community remembers the girl whose smile faded in silence. As we conclude this series on Easy Case Channel, these real-life accounts, drawn from courtrooms and investigations, bring our journey to a close. If you followed along and found the details riveting, smash that like button, share your thoughts in the comments on which story lingered with you most, and subscribe for more true crime narrations straight from the facts. Thanks for watching. Stay curious out there.